Aloha! Welcome to another Mama Presents. Today I have a great pleasure for all of you, and for me. Normally I'm on Maui, but I've had the opportunity to go to Delhi, New York, to the Carmeling Retreat Center. Many of you have seen that we have a Dharma Center on Maui in Paia on Baldwin Avenue, and I am now here with Lama Lodro, Lama Karma Lodro, yes?
Yes.
And he's been generous enough to give us some time to sit and talk. This retreat center here is just that. It's a retreat center where people that are practitioners of Tibetan Buddhism come to retreat? How does that work?
Well, it was originally founded for the traditional 3-year, 3-month retreat, so that we have at the moment 15 people doing the long-term retreat. They went into retreat the 1st of November in 2004, and the end of February of 2008 they will retreat.
Wow.
In the meantime, they will see only one another. There's a 10-foot fence that goes around the building, and they don't go outside that fence. Nobody else comes in.
And I guess that's so that they can really embrace the practice.
It's to reduce distraction. So the time period has to do with the different cycles of the body. In the course of 3 years and 3 months, every cell in the body has been replaced. So when you come out, you've actually are physically a different person than went in. But more significantly, it's a chunk of time to a traditional chunk of time to dedicate to this kind of activity.
I see. Well, that takes a serious commitment. So, do you find that most of the people that go into this activity have been practicing Buddhism for a long time before they go in?
Most of them, but not in all cases. We have one woman in retreat now that's actually in her late 20s, and she only began practicing 2 or 3 years before coming and doing the 3-year retreat.
Wow. And so men are in one facility?
Right. Men in one building, women in another.
And we have, I would say, a very famous and very accomplished Rinpoche here. Let me have you share.
Yeah, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was he's the abbot of Karmatriana Dharmachakra, which is the main monastery in Woodstock, New York, the seat of His Holiness Karmapa in North America. Is the retreat master here. He's in his mid-80s, was born in a yak hair tent on the plains of Kham in Tibet, now part of China, of course, and entered the monastery of Trangru Rinpoche at the age of 12, and after doing retreat and his own 3-year retreat and studying in the monastic college, he was asked to be the tutor for Trangru Rinpoche, and so he traveled with him and studied with him, and Trangru Rinpoche is currently holding the same position with the 17th Karmapa. So he's sort of the Karmapa's tutor's tutor.
I don't know if all of you are familiar with the Karmapa. Why don't you give us a bit of an idea? Because I know I never understood that the Dalai Lama and the Karmapa were separate lineages. I want to compare it with Protestant and Methodist, in other words, the same Buddhism, but different lines.
That's true. The Karmapa was actually the first recognized incarnate Lama in Tibet. In a way, began the tradition. The first Karmapa was Dusen Kempa, which in Tibetan means knower of the three times, because he remembers his previous lives and he knows his future lives. So before he dies, he writes a letter, most often a poem. The first Karmapa was Dusen Kempa, which in Tibetan means knower of the three times, because he remembers his previous lives and he knows his future lives. So before he dies, he writes a letter, most often a poem, that describes when and where he will be born and who his parents are.
Wow.
So it's sometimes a little difficult to understand, because it's the method will be Loga, and the wisdom will be that which represent the mother and father. But when interpreted, one can go follow the directions and find the reincarnation of the Karmapa that way. This is the 17th Karmapa, who is 22 at the moment. In 2000, when we were all celebrating the turn of the millennium, he told the people at his monastery outside of Lhasa that he was going to do a week-long retreat. And in the middle of the night, he jumped out his window onto the kitchen roof, and from there down to the ground, and they took off across Tibet for 2 days, skirting around security checkpoints and all that, until they got to a spot on the edge of the Himalayas, and then he walked out of Tibet.
Wow. So
at the age of 15, so that he did this because he was unable to go and see his traditional teachers, who were all in India, and they weren't allowed to come to see him.
And so I'm going to try to put it together. So I remember 1959, something like that. That's when the Dalai Lama, who was the sitting ruler of Tibet?
The head of the Tibetan government.
Okay.
And also the senior-most Lama in hierarchy-wise in all of Tibet. You know, the Dalai Lama left in 1959. The 16th Karmapa, the previous Karmapa, had already left Tibet by that time.
I see. And so the Karmapa is this, I don't want to say the spiritual head. Someone was explaining the Buddha line. I'm not exactly understanding, but I'm really doing this for your benefit too, to understand. Because like when we're on Maui and we have a Dharma center, I don't know if anyone has really thought, oh, this is of this line or that line.
Yeah. Well, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are 4 general lineages or schools of Buddhism. Like you said, somewhat like different denominations of Christianity or something on this order.
I see.
The overall meaning is the same. The difference is the method of teaching. And the emphasis. In some schools, the emphasis is on study, and others on meditation. Not to say that they don't all meditate and they don't all study, but some put more emphasis in one place or the other. The originally when Buddhism came, it was brought by Padmasambhava, known as Guru Rinpoche, after several, 100 years later, a Tibetan king came who attempted to suppress Buddhism and bring the native religion of. He was eventually assassinated, and Buddhism was sort of revitalized. but that original group forms the Nyingma lineage, which means the old ones, the original teachings as they came. And then among the newer traditions is the Kagyu, the Sakya, and the newest of them, the Gelugpa. The Gelugpa is the Dalai Lama lineage.
I see. So, I mean, I see here in Maui, or in Maui. I could say here in Maui, but I'm not in Maui.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. That's a whole other story for another day.
Yeah.
So, the Karmapa and the lineage of the Karmapa have a center in Woodstock, New York.
Yes.
And from Woodstock, New York, there's a retreat center here in Delhi, New York, which is an hour and a half away. And the Rinpoche is here and kind of oversees the retreats?
He is the retreat master, which means that he would give all of the teachings. There are a lot of different practices that are done, and the explanation of the meaning of those practices and how they're done needs to come from somebody who's already done it. The concept of lineage is really that the information and in some cases the realization, but is transmitted from one person to the next. They say it's like pouring a pitcher of water from one pitcher into another pitcher.
So teaching by not really from a book, but from an individual to an individual. Is it written down? I mean, is that...
Yeah, he's actually often teaching from a book. In our case, Rinpoche, we're currently in the fourth 3-year retreat. On the second retreat, he decided to do everything in great detail and get the best translator, because Khenpo Rinpoche speaks a little bit of English, but not much. So we brought in the best translator, and we actually videotaped all of the teachings for the 3-year retreat.
I see.
And those tapes are now being watched by other retreats. 2 more retreats have watched those. They are they have been transcribed, and those transcripts have in turn been sent overseas. The original Khenpo Rinpoche's original teachings have been transcribed in Tibetan for the monks in India and Nepal. There is a program right now to translate all of it into Chinese for the Chinese retreats. In fact, he went to such detail that it's now sort of becoming the commentaries, the basis of information for retreats around the world.
I see. Wow. And would this kind of a retreat be similar to what would be done in other lineages, or no?
Similar. They would do different practices, but it would be similar. There is another lineage, the Drikun Kagyu, which is a different sub-school within the Kagyu, that is said to do 9-year retreats, because they feel it takes 3 years to learn how to do retreat, 3 years to learn the practices, and then an additional 3 years to actually perform the practices.
Wow.
So they would be in retreat for 9 years.
Wow. That's a little bit beyond my... I can't almost comprehend taking 9 years of your life, but it's really a deepening in the understanding and appreciation of Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And is there an easy definition for what Buddhism is? I don't know how many people, some people know, but how many of you really understand, like you were American,
Right.
and yet here you are fully practicing Lama, and how, maybe you can give me some idea of it, both of what Buddhism is, and then maybe how it attracted you and what got you into this?
Well, Buddhism is difficult. I'm not sure if I can come up with a good definition of it.
Okay.
But obviously, it's the teachings that are that came from the Buddha, who was an actual person who lived 2,500 years ago, became disenchanted with the world and with the suffering in the world, and that he felt there must be some way to alleviate the suffering, to get beyond it, and he practiced practiced in varying different ways until he sat down under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India, and decided that he would remain on that seat until he became enlightened. And in the early dawn, it happened. He became enlightened, which is to say that he understood his he understood the nature of everything. He came to understand he's said to be omniscient, to know the variety of things and the qualities of all things, but in a non-conceptual way. The actual, in a way, it's like somebody who's never tasted anything sweet in their life, and somebody's trying to describe it to them. Ultimately, the only way to understand it is to do it, to taste something like that. In the same way with Buddhism, you actually have to do it. In my case, I was getting sort of tired of working. I felt I'd take the winter off and go skiing, but I never actually went skiing because I realized that I was going to use up all of my savings, and I began to realize that I wanted to take more time off than that, so I sort of think in my mind it was the first time that I retired. And as I thought, I recognized, for years my goal in life was, I figured I'll get married and then things happen or something. Well, I never seemed to be getting married or even particularly doing much about it, so I decided I needed a new goal. And then about this time I had started reading different religions, and I decided that if I had a goal in life, it should be to benefit all sentient beings, benefit people. But then I said, but how? Somebody comes up to you on the street and they say, somebody stole my wallet, I need $1.45 to get home on the train. Very specific. So you give them $1.50 or something, you walk down the street, you turn around, and he's talking to somebody else, giving them the same line. You haven't helped anybody, or have you? If you give money to an alcoholic, what is he going to do? So I recognized that I could do things on the surface, maybe give something to somebody. I started giving blood because I figured blood would be useful in any way, but I wanted to find some way that I could tell how I could actually be helpful to people, and that's when I became a Buddhist.
And some people say, well, then why didn't you just become a priest or a Christian or Judaism or whatever? Something about it obviously struck a chord.
Well, in my survey of different religions, reading as much as possible I could, sort of source books. I read the Bible and the Quran at the same time, and then I read the Tao, and then something else I was reading. Buddhism was what made the most sense to me. It was somehow I connected with it. The Buddhists believe in reincarnation. that after you die, you will be reborn in some fashion someplace else. Not necessarily this world, maybe a different world, a different universe. Not necessarily as human, you could be reborn as a snail or almost anything. But the general feeling is that for particularly people in the West who find Buddhism, it's so unlikely that we become Buddhists that we probably were Buddhists in the past. So I did the 3-year retreat here before I became the manager, and my feeling is that the reason I wanted to do that was that in previous lives I had, made aspirations and sort of dedicated myself to do it sometime in some life. And this is the time that the karma ripened and I did the 3-year retreat.
I see. So I think that pretty well I understand. Some of us, it gets to be a confusion because sometimes we see people out there doing Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, there's that group, and Soka Gakkai. These are all different forms, different lines of Buddhism, right?
That's correct.
I've been here now a few days. Now, obviously, I'm not in the retreat. I'm in what do we call this? This is the Lama house.
Right.
Right. And I want you to know I've had a really wonderful time here. I have really found that everyone here has really just opened up their heart and been really open and accepting of me and shared with me different aspects of what's going on. I've had the opportunity to be involved in some of the prayers that are going on and things, and want to do more, and really have appreciated that time here. I know that probably people don't know, and I'm bringing it up probably for a reason, and that is that the Karmapa, really, they're trying to build a facility here for him to visit and maybe stay here in the United States? Possibly, right?
Yeah.
And when we see the Dalai Lama, I don't know if people really understand that all the giving that goes on around the Dalai Lama has nothing to do with giving as it relates to the Karmapa. So maybe we can, I guess, kindle an energy and an effort for people to be aware of the Karmapa and see what we might do to be helpful to bring more to light his teachings. Now, he's 22 years old. Someone said he's becoming sort of like a rock star, which is funny. I guess he writes music and has done some really great music. And I saw that he's really also an artist, very talented guy. And he also is doing all the prayers that, right, he's doing all these prayers that I see you and the others here doing. That's a very full life. What is his role, really, as the leader of this lineage?
He is the, in a way, our connection to the original Buddha. It's through the Karmapa that we are connected to him. Everything that happens in our lineage is a result of his activity. Karmapa actually means man of action, and so when the first Karmapa studied and became a teacher, he went and established a monastery called Serpu, which is outside of Lhasa, and began teaching. And his style of teaching, the prayers that he wrote, formed the basis of the Karma Kagyu. There's actually originally 12 different subsects of the Kagyu, but the Karma Kagyu is the one we're part of. So Tibet was, at that time, very isolated from the world and isolated from itself. So then every region, there would be a monastery and a lama or a teacher and monks, and in each area they grew up, the practices grew up a little bit different, but the thread that tied many of them together was the monastery that the monks came from that started the new monasteries or whatever. So that the Karmapa is, in a way, the common thread to all of our practices. He's also, in many cases, written the texts, the practices that we do, the books that we study, but remembering that there have been 17 of them, so different Karmapas wrote different things, and it's indeed considered, he's considered to be the same person coming back.
And again, I'm just pulling from what I'm understanding. Khenpo Rinpoche is a teacher of the Karmapa? How does that?
Not really, not really. He was, there are what are known as incarnate lamas, like the Karmapa, teachers who are said to have come back. In most cases, in fact, they don't remember anything of previous lives, and they will basically say, I'm told by people that I respect that I'm the reincarnation of this person, so I will accept that, but I don't see it myself, something on that order.
Mm-hmm.
But with one of these, the Tulkus are extraordinary beings in most cases. And to ensure that the Tulku sort of lives up to his potential, they had the tradition of putting a monk with a brilliant mind or a sharp mind, somebody who's really to press him, to make him live up, so that he would live up to his potential, and that was Khenpo Rinpoche's relationship to Trungpa Rinpoche. Now, when the Karmapa made it out of Tibet, the first place he went was to Dharamsala to see the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama at that point asked Trungpa Rinpoche, who was then the senior teacher of the lineage, to be the Karmapa's tutor, to in fact do the same sort of thing that Khenpo Rinpoche did. So he's not a teacher of the Karmapa, he's indeed met the Karmapa at least once, back when he was first discovered at the age of 7 in Tibet. Rinpoche was there. I'm not sure that Rinpoche has been able, because Rinpoche's age, he doesn't travel too much, so he probably hasn't seen the Karmapa in person since then. But we're hoping that the Karmapa will come to the U.S. Maybe next year.
Oh, great. Well, I could go on, but probably if someone wanted to get more in touch with this information and with the organization, any couple of websites we might give to them? You may see them at the bottom of the screen. We're going to put them up. But
the website for His Holiness's seat in North America is kagyu.org.
KAGYU.org. Okay. And that's the Woodstock location?
That's the Woodstock location. There's another one which is Rumtek, RUMTEK.org, which is his seat in India, which also has pictures and information on the goings-on at that monastery, though the Karmapa himself hasn't actually been able to go there yet due to some Indian politics or something.
Politics, we've heard of that, huh? And what about here? There's a website also for here?
Carmeling doesn't have a website.
Okay.
We have, if you look at the right place, you can find a web page for us at on kagyu.org for Carmeling, which explains the center, and they have a few pictures. Since we're a retreat center, we don't really want visitors.
Well,
So we, the website, the one thing that isn't in the website is exactly where we are.
Oh, I'm not telling. You know, we've had a couple of days here, and I've really gotten to know you personally. And well, besides finding you to be extremely charming and a great host, you've had so many fun stories. Do you have any things that might be different and amusing that you might want to share with these people? Maybe just sort of a different aspect of things, because things aren't always exactly prim and proper. I mean, I'm sure there's more relaxing times, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I just have found everyone here seems to have such a light and happy heart. It's really been a really exciting experience. I never would have thought that coming here to a retreat center, you know, and just spending the time with you and the others here would be such a beautiful and satisfying break from my regular pace, you know.
Well, what it really is that we have renounced most of the world in a way. We have no magazines, we have no television coverage. I think we can get a radio station or two, but I don't listen to the radio. No newspapers, so we don't really know. We don't really know what's going on in the world. We know in general what's going on in the world. We're concentrating more on improving ourselves, training our minds so that we can be in a position to help all beings. In a way, the person who is most sane at Carmeling is Rinpoche, and the rest of it, the rest of us are still having our own little psychosis and catching yourselves on things. I'm constantly sort of constantly catching myself doing silly thing, but a lot of it I think has to do with I like to think of it as not thinking so much, because with meditation what you're really doing is trying to concentrate on one thing, develop the one-pointed concentration, leaving all the other thoughts out. And at first it's like a waterfall. You're not, one thought doesn't even come to an end before the next one begins. One thought tumbling over the other, and as one continues to meditate, in this case, one would probably be meditating on something, such as watching the breath, and the meditation, the purpose of that is simply to let you know when you are distracted. And as time goes on, it becomes more like a raging river. It's like one thought at a time, but there isn't any gaps between them. And slowly one gets to the point where there's a gap between, and that gap, when it first happens, it's very blissful, in fact. And you immediately, oh, that's wonderful, which of course causes you to lose that one moment. But eventually it's said to be like a stream entering into the ocean without a ripple, so that one gets to the point where there is not only a gap between thoughts, but you sit there and a thought arises somewhat like a cloud floating across the sky. And then you can look at that thought and say, well, where did it come from? Where is it? Where is it going? And in this way, learn the true nature of your mind. And the entire process yields a high degree of tranquility, which eventually permeates your entire life, so that you're not quite as excited about things as other people. It comes in. It's most noticeable in times of crisis or something, when everybody, like 9/11, when the building, the planes hit the World Trade Center. I mean, we had somebody coming out here, that we had somebody calling us to tell us that these things were happening, and everybody else was running around and all that, and we were, praying not only for the victims but for the hijackers themselves, because of considering what confusion must have been in their minds to do something so unspeakable.
Yeah.
And believing in karma, that what you do is going to affect what you experience in the future. The worst thing the absolute worst thing one can do is to commit suicide. So they not only committed suicide, but then they killed thousands of people.
Yeah, I got you.
So, but it's looking at it, being able to look at that impartially without getting emotional. A lot of it has to do with what drives us most often. We call the 5 poisons: attachment, aversion, ignorance, pride, and jealousy. And if you look at it, it's like people. You naturally like something, so you want to hold on to it, and so you fight other people so that they won't get it from you. There are other things you dislike, so you try and avoid them, get rid of them. Ignorance, meaning that you don't really know you don't really know the nature of things. You don't really know what's going on. Pride and jealousy has gotten us all into trouble.
So that we strive to be balanced and aware, and I guess I'm still learning too, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Now, many people also talk about the Buddhist way, the Dharma path of coming from a heartfelt and warm nature, instead of being selfish and self-focused. As much as Buddhism is, I want to say, an inside job,
Right.
working on the inside of you, I've also come to understand that focusing in the world, or being in the world and thoughtful of other people, is also considered a high regard. How does that integrate with it all?
Well, there's really 2 aspects to everything we do. One aspect is the act itself, and the other aspect is why, our motivation. Doesn't matter. It's not only what it is we do, but why we do it. Helping ourselves, making ourselves better, or making if we do it for selfish reasons, this is going to lead to suffering in the long term, versus doing it for humanitarian reasons, which will benefit all beings. so that it grows out of this feeling that with reincarnation one feels that one has been born a nearly infinite number of times. And in that time, every person, every bug, everything that any organism